Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a very special edition of the Avoider Show. Why special? It's just about one story. To segue towards it, I'm sure some of you have already watched or were aware of the documentaries about Fire Festival. Now, I watched them as well, the one on Netflix and the one on Hulu. And watching them, I was reminded of something that I was a part of back in 2011. It brings back some very interesting memories. Now, disclaimer first, I am telling the story because I need to, have a topic for a video. Duh, I do want views. But secondly, I do have to say that I am doing this so that I don't have to think about it anymore. I want to be able to offload it after like 8 years. Yeah, like 7, 8 years. Also, some names are going to be withheld. Even though it's been 7 years since then, let's put it this way, since it was a dumpster fire, a lot of people don't want the story told. I cannot predict the behavior of outside people, so if anyone is going to all of a sudden, sue me for slander or whatever, I don't know. I am not entirely sure about it. I might as well keep my bases covered. So let's get to it, shall we? This happened from August until November of 2011. 2011 was a pretty bad year for me. It was the year when, as I mentioned in a previous show, that's when my major depressive episode started. It was to the point that at the start of the year, I was actually fairly fit. I was 160 pounds. A few months afterwards, I was 190. So when this happened, I was already fat. It was that bad. And this thing happening made it even worse. Made me depressed for the rest of, the next few years. Not a lot of things are happening in my life. Not a lot of positive things. And whatever things that do come my way, they have to end up being, absolute clusterfucks. Yeah, so it wasn't very good for my self-esteem. Before I tell my part of the story, let's first preface it by talking about StarCraft 2. Back in around 2011, esports, as we know it now, the modern iteration of esports, it was starting to come up. It was starting to become a thing. Nowadays, esports is definitely a thing. And there's a lot of money invested in it, a lot of money being given out by it. But before that, it was really trying its best to gain its legitimacy. And one of the games that was at the forefront was StarCraft 2. This was in the early 2010s. In the 2000s, there were games like Quake and Counter-Strike. Those games tried to establish an esports scene, and it did for the most part, as well as fighting games. Although fighting game people are kind of different, they're very reclusive to an extent. They don't like the word esports. The fighting game community isn't exactly what you would call corporate. And then, of course, there's the legend that is StarCraft Brood War in Korea. It's what solidified Korea's status as the mecca of esports. There is no denying the fact that StarCraft 2 is a fucking brutally difficult game to play. So if you're really good at it, there's no question you are a damn good gamer. So when StarCraft 2 came out in July 2010, around that time, it had a lot of hype behind it. Oh, look, now we can take part in the legendary StarCraft esports scene. So there was a lot going for it. The hype reached all the way here in the Philippines, of course. Even though there's not a lot of StarCraft players here in the Philippines, there were a very dedicated bunch. And during that time, I got into StarCraft 2 very much, even though I wasn't very good. I only got as high as Platinum League. And by the time Legacy of the Void came around, I stopped playing altogether because the game changed way too much. Nowadays, actually, I'm starting to play it again. I'm trying to learn Terran. I used to play Protoss, but Protoss has changed so much now that, you know what, I'm just gonna play another race. I'm not saying I'm gonna be better than I used to be. Come on, like, I was bronze for a very long time. To that end, I was a member of the StarCraft Philippines Facebook group. If any of you are watching this right now, hello. In August of 2011, someone on there posted something on needing a writer. Now, I'm a freelance writer. That's what I mostly do for a living. And I'm not very good at it. But hey, it pays the bills. Now, during this time, I was 25 years old. I was going to school for multimedia arts, and things weren't looking good for me. I was 25 years old. I was still studying, and I wasn't earning a lot of money. So I answered the call because, okay, this may be an opportunity. Blah blah blah. One thing led to another, and I became a member of an esports team here in the Philippines. Now, before that, I have to preface this by saying I will not mention specific names, but you could just look up the event itself that I'm going to talk about later. The event happened at around November 7 and 8, 2011, in Glorieta Activity Center in Makati. It was a 2-day StarCraft 2 event that had foreign players fly here into the Philippines to compete. It was part of the now defunct IGN Pro League. Our event specifically was the Pacific qualifiers for IPL Season 4. With that information, I'm sure you're gonna be able to Google search that. So I did copywriting for this team, and the leader was, let's put it this way. If you Google his name right now, the event that I'm gonna talk about is one of the very first things you're gonna see. It still hangs over him like, you know, like a sword of Damocles. It's gonna be really hard for him to escape the reputation he had gained from that one mishap. For the purposes of this telling, I'm gonna call him Big Shot, because that more or less was the impression he seems to be giving during that time. But unfortunately, it fell kind of flat. Now, working on esports at first was very interesting. It was pretty fun because, well, this is about a scene where people play video games in competition for a living. That's that's pretty good. And even back then, I was already a combat sports fan. So competition, following competition is something I am genuinely interested in. So esports seemed like this meeting of two different interests of mine: competitive sports and video games. So it seemed natural. Later on, I'm gonna tell you why it's not natural for me. Now, from late August when I joined up, we had for like August, September, October, November, like 3 to 4 months leading up to this thing. People were being assembled to organize this event, this big event. It was going to be really big. If it succeeds, it was going to solidify the team and its reputation here in the Philippine scene. But that prospect seemed to not be enough for Big Shot, because over the course of the next few months, he exhibited certain behaviors that I wouldn't say I would recommend. First up, he always talked about the other people, the leading team during that time and up to now. Well, let's mention the name. It's Mineski. Anyway, Big Shot was really adamant at painting them as the enemy, and it seems to be common behavior, because even in the things that I belong to now, that I'm a part of, talking about the quote-unquote enemy is a common thing for a lot of people. Not for me, because, well, I think it's a waste of time. But for a lot of people, well, they seem to like to put their energies into talking about how bad the enemy is and how good they have going on. I became kind of the secretary in the team because I'm the writer. I organize a lot of the copywriting and a lot of the promotional materials during that time, and even communications to an extent, which I think they put on me jobs that I'm not very good at even to this day. Like 7 years later, I'm still not very good at that shit. Calling people, putting them together. I'm not very good at that shit. All right. I'm good at making videos. I'm good at making graphics, as I have shown now in Manila Wrestling Federation, the organization I'm a part of now. Even just as ridiculous, if not more, than esports, which is pro wrestling. Oh, Jesus. Pro wrestling in the Philippines. God help us all. But coordinating people? Oh, God. I'll never be good at that. So I guess, I was kind of handicapped when I took this job. There's this one instance wherein I had to contact the Australians due to a wiki entry. For those who don't know, in StarCraft 2 community, or StarCraft 2, in the scene, one of the most important websites is Liquipedia, which is Team Liquid's wiki. It used to be just StarCraft, but now they have added all the other games they support. So it's now like an esports wiki. All of the details on the games, and the online scene are there. The teams that compete, the players, and the events that are about to take place. Most of the people who care about the game would go there in order to get their information. It was very important for us to have the page for our event accurately report who is behind it, what is about to go on, where it is, when it will be, and who's going to participate, etc., etc., etc. During that time, of course, it's a wiki, just about anyone can edit it, as long as they have a sufficient amount of authority regarding the information they've entered. The ones that made the page and put in most of the information that were there were the Australians. I had to coordinate with the person in charge of that part of the event. I have to edit this wiki entry so that it says there that the main organizer is us, our team, because they had put in their team. They're simply a part of the greater whole, and we were the main organizers. It was going to take place here in the Philippines. It's mostly organized by the Filipino team, so we have to be the ones to take the credit. And I communicated this to the Australians. Meanwhile, as I am talking to the Australian guy on Skype, I was trying to placate Big Shot on I think we were talking on Google. Yeah, it was like a Google Talk conversation. It was like early morning. It was around 3 to 4 a.m. And he was pissed because when he saw the name of their organization as the lead organizer of the whole thing, he was flipping. There was no need. We could just talk to the guy and say, hey, we gotta change this. But in his mind, in his addled, stressed, and incomprehensible mind, nowadays, I definitely would say dude was kind of crazy. The Australians were trying to steal our thunder. Those were his words, by the way. They're trying to steal our thunder. What thunder? The event hasn't taken place yet, and we don't have much of a reputation yet. We're still trying to establish ourselves. So yes, you're right that we should be the ones to take credit for our own hard work, but you don't have to react like this. So I'm trying to placate him, and this should have been the red flag. Nowadays, if I had taken part in this and I saw that behavior, I would have just quit. You know what? I don't want to work with you. I'm out. You're a waste of my time. But during that time, I had nothing else better to do, so I went through with it. But yeah, that online conversation was very revealing of the kind of person he was. he wasn't emotionally stable. He had attributes that made him a good leader as far as getting people together was concerned, but managing people when they're already there and making things happen, he wasn't very good at it. The people started coming and the event date drew near. It was the weekend. The event, by the way, was happening on weekdays, which is yet another signal that it may not go over that well. Like, come on, a weekday? Come on, you should have it on the weekends so that as many people will be able to watch. And this was no small event. There were major sponsors. Like, we had Nvidia. So it was not a small thing. And everyone was scrambling. We had kind of a meeting on the weekend before the event itself. And I got to meet all these people that I had watched on Twitch. Twitch just was just founded. Look, I still have the mouse pad. Yeah, I still have the mouse pad that I got from that time. Yeah, they were giving out merchandise and shit. And this was the old merchandise, as you can see. Yeah, that was the old logo. They hadn't replaced it yet with the new logo, the purple one. I also have a shirt, although I can't find it anymore for some reason. Maybe my mother hid it. You know, I'm a 32-year-old living in my mother's house. Come on. But yeah, one of the things I remember during that time, aside from meeting Naniwa, who's like, Naniwa was once the best foreign player in StarCraft 2. He was on the cusp of being able to dominate against the Koreans. Nowadays we have Cyril, the Finnish player, and he has succeeded in that. But during that time, the Koreans were still very, very strong, indomitable, and Naniwa was the one that's getting closest to that. So he was definitely a superstar player in StarCraft 2. But as a person, he was kind of a fish out of water. He always had this face, you know, with his jaw hanging out, with a face that looked like it was perpetually in disbelief of whatever the hell is going on. That's Naniwa for you. But I already knew of that because he, in the StarCraft 2 scene, he tended to, you know, exhibit some unusual behavior, shall we say. But he is excused for that because, well, he's Naniwa. I also met the other Swedish player, Sase, who was a really cool guy. I remember going to the washroom to take a wee, and there he was taking a wee as well. We were taking a piss side by side. I remember that, but he was always very cordial, Sase, with his hat. I remember Rachel Kiriko, who was very sweet. I remember his boyfriend Trevor. I remember one of the Australian players. I forgot his name by now, but I remember him being absolutely perplexed at eating rice. For those who don't know, for foreigners, people outside of the Philippines, we eat food differently. We replace the knife with the spoon because, of course, the spoon is more efficient for eating rice. So if we have to cut meats and stuff, we just use the spoon. The fork is just there to assist, right? So the fork isn't there to actually scoop food into the mouth. It's the spoon. That's the Filipino way of eating. But dude is Australian, so he was eating rice with a fork, which to a Filipino is absolutely hilarious. I remember that he bought like a steak with rice meal, you know, from a sizzling plate place, and he was absolutely perplexed. And the steak, I don't know if he liked it. Of course, it's gonna be way saltier than usual. It was supposed to be eaten with rice, so the sauce would be really salty. But I don't think he liked the food. He left it unfinished. Anyway, on to the event. At the eve of the event, no one slept, including myself. And then the sun came up. During this time, alright, it's the big day. I have to go from here. During that time, I was using a laptop still. I don't have this rig, of course. So I was on my laptop, hunched down, communicating with the people I have to communicate with. And I was talking with Big Shot. He was pissed that the Bisayans, the people from Cebu, the players, they couldn't come. Because, well, of course, they have to fly here. And he was asking about plane tickets and such. I'm like, I'm not very good at this. I've only been out of the country twice before, and both to Hong Kong. I'm not exactly what you would call a traveler or globe trotter. If given a choice, even with all the money in the world, I would just stay at home because that's the kind of guy I am. So I have no experience with like booking plane tickets and such. As the event was rolling in, he said something that really, to this day, I find absolutely unbelievable. He said, "Okay, you take care of things from here, like something like that. I'm going home to catch some Z's." Wait, hold on, what? The event is about to start and you're going to get some sleep. In hindsight, I should have warned him. I should have told him, don't do that. Please stay. Because the event is about to start and you're the leader, you're the general of the army, and the battle is about to start. Why would the general, the commander, leave the battlefield when the battle is about to start? Why would you do that? You have to command your troops. But during that time, I was like, okay. This is a common theme for me. But yeah, he went home in Parañaque to get some sleep. He lives in Parañaque. Yeah, it's right next to Makati somewhat, but it's still a long ways away. Come on, especially with Metro Manila traffic. Come on. This is gonna haunt him and us later. So, the event proper was going to start at 10 a.m. And we were starting. By the way, one of the people that flew over here in order to help with the event was Justin Ignacio. During that time, he was the engineer, the lead software engineer of Twitch. He was basically the stream guy. If you had problems with your stream, you contacted him. And he was also a very good observer in StarCraft 2, which I had praised him for, because I'm not very good at it, and whenever I see someone who's really good at it, I'm like absolutely awestruck. But yeah, he was testing the stream and the internet bandwidth. Since it was located in Glorieta, we couldn't get PLDT. So we had to get Globe. Yes, I'm dropping those names here because that's relevant. And Globe basically gave us they gave us like 2 up and down, 2 Mbps, DSL speeds. This was not acceptable. You can't stream with that. You can't stream 720p with that. You can even barely stream 480p with that. I know that now, especially now that I have a fiber optic connection myself here. I get to stream now, and you need to have that kind of internet connection in order to actually have a stream. Even to this day, even with more powerful software, more powerful computers, you still need high bandwidth in order to stream. So we were having problems getting the stream started, and 10 a.m. rolled by. The event was about to start, and we couldn't start because the internet was wonky. Who are we gonna call? You gotta call Globe. But who's the one who could call Globe? Big Shot. The boss himself, who was not there. Everyone was asking, where is he? And all I could say was the truth. He went home to sleep. People were incredulous. Like, what? Another problem happened. Even if we couldn't stream the event, we could at least get the matches going. We can have VODs and we can post them, and it'll still be alright. But the computers kept crashing, including the computers on stage. The main ones. The ones in the sound booth. A big thing in StarCraft 2 is that, you have commentary being piped out onto the audience. You don't want the players to hear that commentary because, well, it'll give them tips on how to defeat their opponent. So you gotta put them in these soundproof booths. We had those. Even those computers were getting wonky. Like, they would crash. All the computers there, like 24 of them, up to 30 of them. There were a lot of computers there, and they were unusable. All of them were crashing. Meanwhile, I was designated as the social media manager of the team. The worst job you could possibly give me. I am not a social media guy. I am so even if now I'm working in that space, you know, I work on content. I write articles. That's pretty much what I do there. But I don't do tweet. Yeah, I've done like live tweeting and such, but it is a capacity of creating content. That's what I'm good at. But being especially during that time, being a social media savvy, no, I'm not, okay? During that time, I only had 2 reasons why I had a Facebook account. To shitpost and to get laid. That's it, okay? End of story. I am not social media savvy, but despite that, they made me a social media manager. Goes to show how good Big Shot was at task delegation. But that's the least of his problems. He was still asleep. So noon came around, 1 p.m. came around, 2 p.m. came around. At that point, a decision was made to actually take the players out of the venue to a net cafe somewhere in Parañaque and play the matches there. So the matches didn't even take place in the venue itself. You had to go to a net cafe to do that. So for most of the event, during that time, on day fucking 1, the place was almost empty. Oh man, shit was falling apart really fast, and yet Big Shot was still not there. He was not there. So during that time, and I had a like a brick phone during that time. Even at 2011, everyone else were starting to get smartphones. I still had a brick phone. But with that brick phone, I was calling him, and it must have been like a dozen attempts before he actually picked up. When he picked up, I was like, hey, Globe screwed us over. They're giving us really wonky connection. We need you to contact them. Can you get here? You know, like, that must have been a really rude awakening for him. He had to sleep because he had not slept for like, I don't know, a few days now since preparing for the event. And yet, now, he got his sleep, he woke back up, only to find out that the event he had lost sleep on was falling apart. There were also other problems, like mishaps with the admission, because they also were selling like VIP tickets, so that, you know, those with VIP tickets would come in, meet and greet with the players, with the pro players, because in that space at least they were actually pretty famous. You know, players like MC and Fruit Dealer, the very first GSL champion, and Naniwa, Sase, you know, all these they were pretty well known. Marine King, of course, during this time he was pretty hot. He was going to be the next boxer or something. There was also Moon, the Warcraft 3 champion. I don't know if anyone recognized him. Warcraft 3 here in the Philippines was only a vehicle for Dota. But I know Grubby is pretty damn big in China. Like, when he goes there, he gets flocked with fans. But yeah, that situation, I did not handle that, so I don't really have a lot of information on what happened there. But suffice to say, people had a lot of complaints about the whole VIP thing. So in the end, I think they just let them all in. And it wasn't a very expensive VIP ticket. It was like 500. Day 1 ended in absolute, like, you know, if it were an actual battle, everyone from our army was like laid on the floor lifeless. Like, it was that type of deal. It was a complete dumpster fire. During that time, it was being talked about online, on Reddit, on Team Liquid forums, everywhere. How much of a shit show it was. And unfortunately, sponsors pulled out, as we were going to find out in day 2. When I woke up, I logged in on Facebook, and saw that there was a bracket, there was a tournament bracket that was posted in the Facebook group. Hey, this is a sample of what the bracket's gonna be. I took it as it was the real deal. So I went to Wikipedia and entered the names on the playoff bracket because we had a pool format, as a lot of StarCraft 2 tournaments are done. Day one is pool play, and then the top two from each of those groups goes to the playoffs, the round of 16. I saw that bracket and entered that. That wasn't it. It wasn't supposed to be anyway because they hadn't drawn lots on who gets to play against who. I got to the venue, and then one of us, I specifically know it was Ainz. Hi Ainz. He came up to me and said, what was that? Remove that. That's not the official bracket." So I'm like, oh shit, fuck. Later on, in the fallout of the event, one of the problems was match fixing. And they used the old bracket that I had entered and then the new bracket that actually was the official bracket. The difference between them was shown as evidence of match fixing. No, it was not match fixing. It was my fault. It was me being a diligent idiot, as always. Even to this day, I'm still a diligent idiot. So yeah, that was my fault. That was my bad. But it wasn't a really big deal, because I could take the fall for that. I'm fine with it. I'll take the blame. I'm your scapegoat in that particular thing. A lot of things happened during the gap between day one and day two. Like, our production team was actually not supposed to be there because the production guy, John, he wanted to quit because he knew he wasn't gonna get paid. But people convinced him to stay there. He's still doing it, by the way. He still does esports events to this day. Despite this dumpster fire, he kept going, and him and DJ, who likes to give me shit on Facebook. Jeez. At this point in day two, the computers were alright. They found the reason why it was crashing, and the internet connection was also made okay now. It had 10 up and down, which was more or less sufficient for streaming at that point. For reference, I have 30 up and down, around 25 to 30 up and down here with my fiber optic connection. The computers, it turns out they had 2 sets of different video card drivers installed. So that, if they set it up and they install the video card, they just have to uninstall the one that it's not for. One's for NVIDIA, one's for AMD. We were using NVIDIA because they were our sponsors. So all they had to do was uninstall the AMD drivers. Was it already AMD that time, or was it still ATI? Anyway, finally, the computers were working fine. I remember specifically, this is off a tangent, that one of the players was French. So he switched the keyboard layout to French. In the French keyboard layout, Q in the QWERTY keyboard, Q is actually Z. So when I was typing on it, I was like, I wanted to type Q, but it turned out Z. Like, what the hell's going on? Is there something wrong with the keyboard? And then later I realized, oh, wait a minute. It's that French guy that's been using this keyboard and this computer. Oh, okay. It's a foreign layout. There are like Taiwanese players there too. Sen. I remember Sen. I called him the Charles Barkley of StarCraft because he was just good at playing the game. I remember that. I remember mentioning it to Gunrun, Justin Ignacio. Why am I remembering all these disparate memories? I don't know. But yeah, the event was a blur for me, but I do remember certain things. I also remember drawing the lots for the actual official bracket. It's basically slips of paper in a hat. One of the managers of the Korean players was watching it unfold. That was how it was supposed to go. There was supposed to be an arbiter and a witness to see that, these were the names being drawn out of the lot. In hindsight, we should have taken a video of that. Someone actually mentioned, hey, kailangan video natin to. you gotta pardon me because this is 7 years ago, and it was a memory that for the most part was being suppressed. So me trying to recall this, all of this information is coming to me in like waves. I didn't prepare other than like a simple outline, but even then, telling the story is pretty difficult because too much shit happened during that time. But yeah, I remember the matches finishing right up until the end. At this point on day two, Big Shot was no longer in charge. Sponsors had pulled out. IGN no longer streamed the event because they kind of have, more or less kind of disowned it. Gun Run, Justin Ignacio, he was talking to David Ting, who during that time was the head of IGN Pro League, and they were watching this whole clusterfuck unfold. And I think what events like this was the reason why the IGN Pro League folded in the end. But yeah, I remember them talking, trying to console the head of the IGN Pro League. I know that because I sat right beside Gunrun. Gunrun observed in the computer to the left. I was on the computer to the right, uh, doing social media stuff and entering data into the Wikipedia entry of the event itself to give updates. Although during this time, social media responsibility was taken from me. It was taken from me because a different organization took over in order to stream the event. Was it like what, CSW or something? Oh, okay. CSN, Cyber Sports Network. They took over streaming for the event. Basically, they were trying to salvage it. And during day two, everything was actually running great. And it was gracious of them. But of course, it had to be one of their own people doing the social media rounds during that time. So I remember Rachel Kiriko taking the responsibility from me because, well, she was part of CSN. And her boyfriend, Torch, Trevor Houston, took over the running of the event itself. So Big Shot was, for the most part, no longer in charge, at least for that particular time. And we followed their lead, and everything went great. And we also had Tastosis as our guest commentators. For those who don't know, Tastosis is they're pretty much the StarCraft 2 commentators. They are the dynamic duo, the Batman and Robin of StarCraft. They are the best commentary team on the planet when it comes to StarCraft 1 and 2. And they're still doing it to this day. Like, before this, I was actually watching highlights of their commentary. It's great. And I remember day 2, they commentated the very final match between Marine King and Moon. And Marine King, during that time, he was so good, he basically did a Thor rush against Moon in that series and won the whole series. For those who don't know, that's a cheese build. That's a cheese strategy. He cheesed the other finalist, who used to be one of the greatest Warcraft 3 players in the world, swagged on him, won the event, and then after that, I remember Tastosis having to immediately leave the place because they had to take a flight back to Korea just after the game ended. I remember that. I hope they had luck in Manila traffic. After the event, I went to the back in the part with the computers. We're in Big Shot and another member of the team, an Australian, who was actually fairly well known for being a raging asshole online, but in real life was actually pretty nice. I remember those two, hunching over a computer, typing up an apology letter. And they called me and said, hey, can you please proofread this apology letter? One better than that. I didn't just proofread and edit it. I wrote the rest of it. So if you ever find that apology letter, I wrote it. So after writing it, I gave it to Big Shot, and he read it in front of the crowd. He read it in front of the stream, apologizing for, basically the dumpster fire that our event went through. After that, the event was done. The prizes were awarded, and also a question mark, because during that event, it wasn't just one event. It turns out it was actually two events. The other one being a Heroes of New Earth tournament, and because during day one the computers didn't work, and because of many other complications, and the event being taken over by the good people of CSN and Twitch, the Heroes of New Earth tournament never happened. And the conspiracy is whatever happened to the prize money. We don't know for sure, but that is the one question mark that was left in people's minds. But anyway, after the event itself finished, there was a quote-unquote after party. The saddest and most somber after party I have ever been to, or anyone else would have ever been to, because oh my god. The mood was a mixture of relief, mortification, and consolation. Because during that time, they felt that, this isn't that big of a disaster. We can still go on. Come on, like the North American Star League had a very disastrous first event, and they were able to go on for like how many seasons before they had to fold. It wouldn't be that bad for us, right? Well, more on that later. It wouldn't be that bad. In fact, in our future events, Sonny, you should be our commentator. You can do it. I'm like, me? Commentary? Okay. I guess now it's full circle. I am an actual commentator now, but not esports. I'm a wrestling commentator now. I remember at least two specific things from that after party. Number one, I talked to Big Shot about my payment, and I just said, give me a Razer keyboard and we're okay. Instead, I only got a Razer bag. I never got a keyboard. I was supposed to be paid like $120. Which during that time would have been 5,000 pesos. He hasn't paid me yet. To this day. Number two, I remember he said, hey, order whatever you want. So I drank like 4 glasses of iced tea during that time. And then I went home because, of course, my mother's worried. She's waiting for me because if I don't come home at night, she does not sleep. So I had to come home fast. She actually yelled at me when I got back home. I remember that. After the event itself, the fallout was pretty gruesome. Everyone was in fear of being outed by the public. Because, well, of course, this is the internet. Big Shot, his name was being dragged through the mud. And as more details of how the event itself fell in the shambles, he had to do like interviews and such. The Cyber Sports Network, CSN itself, had to interview a lot, like at least how many people here? 4 people. It's still on YouTube. I'm looking at it right now. And in one of them, actually, they interviewed the Australian guy I had that Skype conversation with regarding the wiki entry, and he was actually addressing an issue that I got involved in, because right after the event, he actually named me as one of Big Shot's co-conspirators, and said that his communication with me was aggressive and blunt. That I was really rude towards him. And so I was like, okay. Like, where is this coming from? I posted screenshots of our conversation. And it turned out I was actually fairly respectful. I also posted screenshots of my conversation with Big Shot during that time that was happening at the same time on that fateful early morning. And so he looked at this and was like, oh, okay. Maybe Big Shot's aggressiveness was channeled through me. That's why he felt I was rude. That's what he said in the interview with Cyber Sports Network.
Avoider, otherwise known as Sonny Go, I think his name is, where I mentioned that he was very, very direct and blunt and aggressive. But after reviewing the logs of my conversation with him, it was actually that was throwing all the aggression out, and it was just Sonny kind of, what's the right word? I guess Sonny just repeating everything that was saying and being very, very blunt, I guess, kind of sticks. It kind of emulated the effect of him being aggressive, but looking back over the logs, he's actually quite professional about it. So I do owe him an apology for saying that he was aggressive when he wasn't.
Here's the thing, Derek. Maybe you felt that I was blunt and rude because I am actually that fucking blunt. I'm a really blunt and rude person in real life. So yeah, he actually publicly apologized to me. Yeah, I accepted the apology. It was merely a mix-up. It was one of the many things that could happen in a clusterfuck like this. I don't remember the details clearly of the things that happened during that time, but I do remember that the team still had the intention of moving forward. I wasn't participating in the conversations, but I guess everyone else was tossing mud around. Things devolved to the point wherein Big Shot called one of his associates to start purging the Facebook group of the team. Why this was necessary, I'm not entirely sure, because I thought we were all in this together. People were still in it together anyway. They were still, they still had hope. At least we had this kind of event. Like, even though it was a failure, at least it finished. At least it went through, and so we could use that as a jumping off point for our future events. We would do smaller events, but we would do them well, and thus we can establish ourselves, right? Nope. They were even thinking of like changing the name of the team to something better, but well, the problem was the team was actually disintegrating to the point wherein nothing else was left of it afterwards. I also remember another guy being one of the higher ups in the team. I remember that. The problem was during the whole time he was not in the country, as far as I know. But after everything had happened, he actually contacted me and said, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you." I was not in the mood to talk. I was not in the mood. I was like, "No, I don't think I'm supposed to talk to you." "Oh, okay. That's pretty rude, but okay." What do you expect? Never talked to you during the whole time. I know who you are, and yet I've never seen your face. And so, yeah, I refused them. Like, duh. Where were you? But I think he was one of the people that were behind the revival of the issue years later. Oh yeah, I also remember the day after the event, and part of the whole thing is basically accommodations for the players and the managers and such. Everyone flying in for the event. And they actually arranged for hotel rooms in a nearby hotel. The responsibility of that was actually put upon another member of ours. We saw him as basically kind of like the second in command. He used to play. He used to be a pro Counter-Strike player. But basically, Big Shot put the hotel accommodations on his name. That's why when he was there to talk it out with the hotel management, they actually kind of took him hostage. They wouldn't let him out of the hotel because they had to pay for the rooms. He was basically jailed in the hotel for that day. It was until actually Gunrun, the engineer from Twitch, actually took out $900 from his pocket to partially pay for the expenses. To that effect, the Big Shot actually threw him under the bus. Instead of it being on his name, as it's supposed to be, because he's the leader of the whole thing, he put it on someone else. It was supposed to be him who had been taken hostage by the hotel management. But yeah, during this time we started to really understand what kind of person he was. What I remember of the fallout, I remember very little. Days after, on November 11, 2011, it was the release of Skyrim. So I remember playing Skyrim to forget about the pain that that event put us through. So effectively, Skyrim was my therapy. Oh yeah, for a lot of other people too. And the remnants of that team even had plans to start their own team by themselves. That fell through. Everyone was way too busy and trying to move on from the whole thing. So that never came to fruition. At one time, we were gonna call ourselves Ronin. Yeah, I even made a logo. And for a time, I was also trying to get into esports. I thought that, you know what, maybe I could actually do something. You know, maybe write for esports websites and maybe even commentate. So I tried to do that, and I felt then I realized, you know what, I'm out of my depth. The happenings of the esports scene fly by way too fast. The pace was too quick for me, and this was even more so with commentary. I tried to practice commentary in StarCraft and a bunch of other games. I couldn't keep up. This brain is not designed for it. Let's put it this way: if my brain was a computer, it would have terabytes of storage. But it has like, I don't know, maybe 8 gigs of RAM and a Celeron processor. Not very fast. This brain lags. Even in like wrestling and fight commentary, I would lag a little bit. But I'm getting better at it, especially with my work in Manila Wrestling Federation. But esports commentary, I couldn't handle it. It was way too fast for me. So I have like massive respect for esports commentators, the shoutcasters. If you're watching this and you are an esports commentator, massive respect. I have massive respect for you because I can't do what you do. Afterwards, basically the team disintegrated and we moved on with our lives. Some of us actually stayed in esports. Others have just, you know, tried to put it behind them. We never heard from Big Shot again, aside from like his activities on Facebook every now and then. Whenever we would actually talk about the incident, the event, he would kind of pop up and say, "Hey, what up, bitches? You talking about me? Wow, what thick face you got there." I remember years later, they actually tried to revive the issue. They started a new Team Liquid thread wherein they were actually trying to accuse the accountant, her name is Amanda, by saying that she stole money. Although I don't really have any information on that, since I didn't handle the financials. Amanda was actually traumatized by the whole thing, and they were trying to somehow revive Big Shot's credibility. That was a chance for me to dump all of the evidence I had that I had been sitting on, because after the event itself, I was told by people to not talk about it to other people because they were fearing for their own well-being. They feared getting sued, so they were like, they even had me try to delete our names, everything from the Wikipedia entry about our team. Of course, that was not allowed. But yeah, it was basically to protect us. Protect you from what? You'd still pop up with a simple Google search, damn it. But yeah, because of that whole scare, I sat on evidence for years. It was on my Dropbox account the whole time. I was like, this is my chance now. I'm gonna dump everything here. I like to think that because of my post, the last vestiges of his credibility was shot, and there was never going to be another attempt for him to be relevant ever again. I don't know. I kind of want to like to think that maybe they actually talked it out about the whole money situation, but hey, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't handle them. I didn't handle the money. But after posting that, actually, I was contacted by one of the Big Shot's friends. I won't say who. It was a woman though. Yeah, she basically tried to invite me again to help out Big Shot. I guess he was trying to come up with a new thing. She was even saying that he's actually in dire financial straits. He has a family to feed. Come on, he doesn't even have his own computer at this point. He had sold everything in his house. There was no way they were gonna be able to recruit my help ever again. He still owed me money. I told her that. He still owes me money, you know that? Yeah, okay, fine. I'll try to find a way if you can get paid, but please help us. I'm like, no. No. I've been burned before. I'm not gonna get burned again. Are you fucking nuts? So yeah, that was that. That was the second to the last time I've ever heard of him. So what went wrong? Basically, there was a point of no return. Him going back home. That was the culmination of everything that all the hard work being wasted. But even before that, there were a lot of things wrong, especially with Big Shot. Big Shot wasn't exactly a good boss to work for. He didn't give me grief exactly, but he gave grief to a lot of other people who were helping him, and he was actually arguing with them because it turned out he had a volatile temper. So if he gets pissed off, he just forgets about everything and just, tries to, get back at you if you ever piss him off. Even if it's ill-advised, even if it's the last thing he should ever do, he would just act on impulse. But perhaps the the worst thing that was done during the whole thing was putting all your eggs on the sponsor basket. That was the one major thing that really made it fail, because afterwards there was no money. There was no money at all. The workers couldn't get paid. The people whose services we had employed couldn't get paid because there was actually no money. The team itself was just a ragtag group of people with no financial backing, entirely dependent on sponsor money. So when the event fell through because of, the wonky internet, and thus, it had bad publicity, the sponsors pulled out. Big Shot termed it as sponsors screwing us over. Well, you screwed them over first by failing to deliver on your promises. So of course they're gonna pull out. You don't have any money anymore that you were promised, that you were going to use to pay everyone else. I get to compare this experience to what I'm doing now in Manila Wrestling Federation. At this point, Philippine Esports has made it. It has made it. We have esports teams, we have infrastructure, we have people earning millions and millions of pesos while still in their late teens by going to Dota 2 tournaments, going to League of Legends tournaments. Esports is a thing now here in the Philippines. And the only reason why that sounds kind of unusual is because, well, video games, and parents still can't fucking believe it, but you know what? That's a reality now. Esports is a thing here. We in Manila Wrestling Federation are trying to pull off something that's maybe even more far-fetched. Yeah, even more far-fetched than professional video games. Pro wrestling here in the Philippines, which has been done before and failed. But we're trying to make it work. Now, here's the thing. We're not the first, of course. PWR was there first. We're trying to follow suit with our own product. But yeah, the difference between that team and Manila Wrestling Federation is the people in Manila Wrestling Federation, for the most part, are actually fucking serious about making wrestling work here in the Philippines. We've been going on for like 2 years now, and we're still going. This is our 3rd year. I'm the former ring announcer and now the host and the lead commentator. And I also do graphics and video, and I'm also, I guess I would call myself a technical advisor because I know a little bit about martial arts and wrestling. So I get to actually help out with training to a certain extent. But yeah, I'm loving my role in Manila Wrestling Federation. I still kind of miss ring announcing because I really loved ring announcing, but oh well, Esports commentary perplexes me, but wrestling commentary, oh yeah, I can do that. Big Shot himself, he reminds me of a lot of the figures here in the Philippine wrestling scene. There are some who are like him. There's a lot of ego at play here in the local scene, and well, the good thing about them though is they actually can follow through. I remember a story by my good friend and brother, pretty much my brother, BJ David, formerly of Nerd Rage. He told me a story of his friend and the vocalist of Stereo Deal, Adrian Arceca, came up to BJ and told him about, hey, I'm being propositioned by this guy, Big Shot, about, working with him on stuff. BJ heard the name of Big Shot and said, oh, wait a minute, I recognize that name. Sonny Go actually, has worked with him. He worked on him on this StarCraft 2 event that flopped later on. You want to hear what Sonny has to say about that? Adrian was like, no, no, no need. I've heard enough. Well, if you had no interest on hearing that story, well, here's that story. I guess that's it for now for the Avoider show. It was a mess of a story, but good thing I was able to finally put it to rest. Anyway, until next time, stay Tor. Avoider out.